Tansin etute magtiar Wheatley Nisigasun o Pasquac Uche. Tawau, welcome to APTN National News. Today marks the 5th National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, and survivors are gathering in Ottawa to commemorate the day for those who didn't make it home. Our Creason Ajikore is there and will join our co-host Dennis Ward in co-hosting APTN's pre-show later this afternoon. But first, Creason, can you tell us how things are shaping up there?
Tanse Tiar, we are located on the unceded Algonquin territory known today as Parliament Hill in Ottawa for the Remembering the Children National Day for Truth and Reconciliation event, now in its 5th year. There will be a star-studded lineup for this year's event, including Susan Aglukar and Julian Taylor, plus many more artists. Hundreds of survivors and visitors from across the country have gathered on Parliament Hill to take part in the important messaging of the day that the Indigenous people of this land, the First Nation, Métis and Inuk people, have suffered great hardships from the systems Canada have put in place, including Canada's dark legacy of the residential school system. And we have gathered to tell our important stories of resilience and survival, but also to highlight that many of our children who were forced to attend school never made it home. And that has sent many shockwaves and ripple effects to our people for many generations. Today we gather to listen and to learn about our shared history and to find solutions for today and the next 7 generations. Here is what Elder Claudette Commanda and APTN CEO Monica Ile had to say about the significance of today.
It's very important for Canadians to take part in September 30th, the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation, for the simple fact that they need to reconcile with their past. They need to reconcile of what their forefathers have done to our people as First Nations people. This residential schools, as we know, was an assimilation process to kill the Indian, to destroy that spirit in the child, and it basically was to destroy our nations. But they need to know their history. That's so important. To know the truth about their history.
This is a very proud moment for APTN. We have a partnership for this day with the National Center for Truth and Reconciliation, there's CBC, the Algonquin Nation. We work together to organize this event, and we've been doing this event for the past 4 years. And I think that this year, this event is getting a wider reach. I mean, this show will be live on more than 36 television outlets, more than 150 radios. This has never been seen before, and I think people want to be part of this.
Joining me for the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation pre-show at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time is elders and survivors Laurie McDonald and Brian Norman, who will share their story of resiliency and why Canadians should listen and learn. Back to you, TR.
Kinanaskamitin Creason, looking forward to that. And to mark the day, APTN News is also taking a look at how many of the 94 calls to action have been answered since the Truth and Reconciliation Commission delivered its final report in 2015. Here's Sav Jonesa with the details.
This year marks the 10th anniversary of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's final report and its 94 calls to action. The Indian Residential School Settlement Agreement and the stories of thousands of survivors culminated in concrete actions the TRC found would redress the lasting harms of the genocidal institutions and advance reconciliation. But how many of these 94 calls have been answered now, a decade later? Well, some might say not a lot, and even more calls have yet to be heard. Indigenous Watchdog is a nonprofit group dedicated to monitoring and reporting on how reconciliation is advancing in so-called Canada. In a 10-year progress report published earlier this month, they found 40% of the 94 calls are not being responded to. That means 22 calls to action are stalled and 16 have not even started, leaving 42 calls in progress with only 14 of the 94 calls completed since 2015. You might wonder who's responsible for the progress or lack thereof. Those accountable to answering certain calls include a mix of the federal, provincial, territorial, and Indigenous governments, religious organizations, and various other entities and associations. The calls to action, or CTAs, target 22 areas ranging from child welfare to health, language and culture, justice, and much more. Only 9 of these categories have at least one call completed, according to Indigenous Watchdog. Some CTAs of note are number 3, calling for the full implementation of Jordan's Principle, which has been recently stalled due to funding changes within the federal program. Also stalled is number 58, calling for the Pope to apologize to Catholic Church residential school survivors and family. It was only partially met in 2022 when Pope Francis apologized for the Church's role in Indian residential schools, which some say fell short. Former chair of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, the late Murray Sinclair, said this in response. It is important to underscore that the Church was not just an agent of the state, nor simply a participant in government policy, but was a lead co-author of the darkest chapters in the history of this land. CTAs yet to see any movement include number 6, calling for the repeal of Section 43 of the Criminal Code. This call looks to end corporal punishment against children by parents and teachers. And CTA 55 calling on all levels of government to publish annual reports on progress towards reconciliation. Despite these areas that still need improvement, there are still calls answered and completed, such as CTA 49 calling for all religious denominations and faith groups to repudiate the doctrine of discovery, and CTA 41 calling on the federal government to appoint a public inquiry into missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit people. It took 10 years for 14 calls to be answered following the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's release of their final report. If reconciliation efforts continue at this rate, the 94 calls to action won't fully be answered until 2082. Which begs the question, how many residential school survivors will see reconciliation in their lifetime? Sav Jones, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
Tapwagi Sav, the government of Saskatchewan issued an apology on Monday to Isle Cross residential school survivors. An agreement in principle was also signed promising restitution for survivors who suffered abuse. With more, here's video journalist Rachel May.
And today, on behalf of the province of Saskatchewan, I apologize to you.
Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe was in Isle Cross Monday to apologize to survivors of the residential school there. Along with his apology, Moe announced a $40.2 million agreement in principle based on 4 pillars of concern to provide compensation to survivors.
Those 4 major pillars are that the former students shared a common experience, that there was individual abuse, that the community requires legacy, healing, wellness, education, language, culture, and commemoration. And finally, the addressing of the legal fees, the disbursements, and the costs associated with the administration of the entirety of that settlement.
The provincial government and Catholic Church operated the Isle Cross residential school from January 1st, 1860 to December 31st, 1976. Moe says he hopes today's apology and agreement will be a stepping stone towards building a better future for generations to come.
Each and all of us. We have a past in Canada. It's not all great, but we need to acknowledge it. And we need to work together on understanding it before we can ever take those first steps forward in rebuilding our communities and making our province and our nation a better place for that next generation and for our kids.
Buckley Belanger is the Member of Parliament for Desnethi, Missinippi, Churchill River, where Isle Cross is located. He went to this school after his mother passed away. He thanks survivors for their advocacy to ensure that Isle Cross's voice is heard, as the school was not eligible for the Indian Residential School Settlement Agreement. Belanger then shared a message on behalf of the Government of Canada.
And that same little guy that was standing at the edge of the rink and sleeping in a really large dorm, he can now say on behalf of the Prime Minister of Canada and the Government of Canada, I am pleased to see the Isle Cross Residential School file finally completed from the province's perspective.
In March 2025, the Government of Canada signed an agreement in principle with All Lacrosse survivors to support investments in commemoration, healing, language, and culture. Rachel May, APTN National News, Saskatoon.
Kinanaskamitin, Rachel, and as we head to break here, here's a live shot of the 5th annual Orange Shirt Day Healing Walk in downtown Winnipeg. Pitigua. That's a pretty large crowd in downtown Winnipeg. In Winnipeg, the Winnipeg Police Major Crimes Unit is investigating a fire at Manitoba Cabinet Minister Nahanni Fontaine's constituency office in North Winnipeg early this morning. The fire comes on the heels of several windows being smashed at the office last week.
The Winnipeg Fire Paramedic Service says they responded to a fire at Nahanni Fontaine's MLA constituency office just before 5 a.m. this morning. The blaze was under control less than an hour later. Some windows are covered in smoke residue while others no longer exist. The front door lock appears to be pried and a strong scent of fire lingers in the air. Police say the K9 unit was used while investigating the scene and that there are no suspects or arrests as of yet. Recent acts of vandalism left Fontaine's office with broken windows last week. Police would not confirm if the incidents are related. Fontaine has spoken out on social media about harassment. A statement from the Manitoba government says this is a serious matter that is currently under police investigation, so we will not be commenting further at this time. We will continue following this story as it develops. Sav Jonesa, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
Tapwegi Sav. Meanwhile, the federal government has ordered Canada's first ever post-mortem conviction review. It involves the 1970s killing of a restaurant worker in Winnipeg. Sean Fraser, Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Canada, ordered the review into the case of Russell Woodhouse, a man from Penay-Mutang First Nation north of Winnipeg. Fraser says he found reasonable grounds that a miscarriage of justice occurred in Woodhouse's conviction. He's ordered the case back to court so new information can be included. Woodhouse, who died in 2011, was convicted in 1974 in the death of Ting Fong Chan alongside Alan Woodhouse, Clarence Woodhouse, and Brian Anderson, also from Penay-Mutang. Alan, Clarence, and Brian were later found to be wrongfully convicted and acquitted after information surfaced that Winnipeg police and a Crown attorney misled the court. Dozens of supporters were wearing orange shirts Monday morning on the Samson Cree Nation an hour south of Edmonton. Elders and youth walked about 4 kilometers to honor the lost children and survivors of residential schools. Created by Samson Community Wellness, the walk allowed people to remember those they lost. The annual event finished with lunch, guest speakers, and songs.
It's an event that we've gotten a lot of support on, and it's to honor all of those that are affected by residential school, the children that have never made it home, and our communities that are forever impacted by colonization.
This is why I walk, and this is why education is. You need to know the culture of Indigenous people in this country, how it's in Turtle Island. It's not just in Canada, it's downstates too. It's coming up. How many of us are missing? It's not something, it didn't happen, and it did happen. Educate the children, educate the newcomers.
We now want to tell you about the first of 3 web poll questions this week. We ask, did you take part in an event marking the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation? Your options are yes and no. And we hear from the founder of the Orange Shirt Society, who's co-written a book aimed at denialists when we come back. Cheskwa. Ottawa, welcome back. St. John's 9 degrees, Charlottetown 18. Happy Valley Goose Bay 9, Inukjuak 6. Chibougamau 7, Quebec City 16. Sault Ste. Marie 19, Peterborough 20. Big Trout Lake 11, Kapuskasing 10. Churchill 11, God's Lake 13. Barons River 19, Winnipeg 20. North Battleford 15, Yorkton 20. Uranium City 13, La Ronge 14. Moving west, Peace River 15, Grand Prairie 17. Edmonton 19, Lethbridge 22. Bella Coola 6, Campbell River 11. Dease Lake 8, Smithers 10. To the north, Rock River -1, Mayo 8. Norman Wells 5, Fort Simpson 12. Inuvik -1, Colville Lake 0. Phyllis Webstad has become a household name when it comes to answering the TRC's 94 calls to action, sharing her orange shirt story through half a dozen children's books. Now she's co-written a book confronting residential school denialists called Decolonization in Me. Hear all about it in her own words.
In my research on what decolonization meant, one of the things I read somebody say was to speak up when you know something isn't right. I'm Phyllis Webstad. I'm Shwepmch or Shuswap from the interior of BC, just outside of Williams Lake.
Tell me a little bit about why it was so important for you to do this book.
I felt it was part of my responsibility as an Indigenous person to just to speak up about denialism and how harmful it is and how hurtful it is for families, because there's people alive today that have brothers and sisters, aunts and uncles that didn't come home. And when these deniers are saying things like, you know, where's the bodies and why aren't you digging them up? And there's a lot more to the story than they'll ever know. And I know one person, Charlene Beaulieu from Alkali Lake or the Esquette band outside of Williams Lake. She has an uncle that's missing and she wants to bring him home. And what she says to deniers is, come and help me. We're just at the starting gate of the missing children and unmarked burials, dealing with that as Indigenous people, and yet we're expected to be at the finish line. The story's this long. This is the truth here. And what they understand is this much, maybe half or a little bit more. And so the rest is made up. What somebody told them, what they heard, this must be the case. So with this book, it's an attempt to fill in that gap so that maybe their attitude and their behavior can change. It may or may not, but I had to at least try. I'm thankful everybody in my family came home, all 14 of us, but that's not the case in a lot of families. I lived with my grandmother in Khatlum or Dog Creek until I was 10. So when I turned 6 in July 1973, she brought me to town like any caregiver, parent would, to get their child ready for school. And I chose a shiny orange shirt with a collar, and it had 3 little button holes with like a shoestring lace in front. And that's the story that I told when I got to the St. Joseph Indian Residential School, where 3 generations of my family attended. My orange shirt was taken, everybody's clothes was taken, so my story is not unique.
You've been across the country, talked to many people. Have you had denialists come up to you and say things like to your face?
Never. It's what do they call them? Keyboard warriors. Yeah, I've seen it on social media and I've seen it on television. So I thought with all of these screenshots that I took on Facebook, I'm only on Facebook, and that it was bothering me that people don't get it. Some don't get it. There's a lot that do. And I have this crazy thought of being in a room of deniers. It's like, yeah. It would be listening to each other and both sides, and then trying to see what's the problem here, and how do we, because as the late Mary Sinclair said, we're all here, nobody's going away, and we need to learn to get along.
Somebody watching this interview hasn't seen the book. What's one thing you would tell them about needing to get this book?
You will need to take time, be in the right headspace, and approaching it with an open mind and an open heart. I've been on my healing journey since 1994 when I was 27. I'm 58 now. And a lot of my healing journey has been looking at the past and what happened. Life can be understood backward, but must be lived forward. So looking at my history as a Secwepemc person, what happened with the coming of the smallpox, to wiping out 92% of our people along the Fraser River, being put onto reserves, being sent to residential schools. It's like, it's apocalyptic. And then you have the 60s scoop, and then now the taking of children, and it hasn't ended yet, the genocide in Canada. In writing a book, you get immersed, and that's all you think about. You eat, breathe, and live the subject. And I came upon a lot of people doing great work in this area of decolonization. And so basically our whole society needs to be decolonized, from our government to our education system, our healthcare system. We just barely touch the surface of what decolonization means and the work that's to be done.
Season 12 of Face to Face kicks off tonight with a special episode for this National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. Residential school survivor Jennifer Wood joins host Dennis Ward tonight on the season premiere. Wood addresses what appears to be a recent rise in residential school denialism.
Denialism, you're always going to have them. No one is ever going to agree that did happen, because if they do agree that did happen to our people and they were that people, they're going to be responsible, and they would have to feel responsible and be responsible. So we've always faced that our entire life of being a survivor, of never being believed. That's common amongst survivors, and we are so used to it. Well, now we're not taking that attitude anymore. We're going to challenge them back and say, here's the facts, this did happen to us. This individual, sadly, that feels that she has to come to the National Centre and protest and advocate that, what is happening out in Canada or across Canada or Kamloops never happened. That is just so ludicrous, and we just look at ourselves and go, well, we're used to this. I mean, here they come again.
And that's all the time we have for this September 30th. I'm TR Wheatley. It's been a pleasure. Dennis Ward and Creason Adjacote are back at 2:30 p.m. Eastern for our pre-show coverage, gearing up to the Remembering the Children National Day for Truth and Reconciliation event in Ottawa. Then Dennis is back at 6 p.m. Eastern for continued coverage on this Orange Shirt Day. Until then, from all of us at APTN to all of you, Egase, Gitam, Gagawapamit Dinanaw.